Hey everyone, Debbie Reed here, Think Healthcare Solutions, Trust Fight Healthcare, and the Healthitude Academy. Welcome here to our episode. It's not Ask a Frustrated Nurse, although I am frustrated when I think about these things. This is not related to that series. This is a different series. This is related to the blog post that I post and what we do here at Think Healthcare Solutions. I wrote an article today. It's called Consumers Fight Healthcare Costs. And I tried to be fair and relatively generic in what I had to say. But it's another layer of my attempt to get people to understand that walking around with this and handing it to everyone you come across, whether it be your provider, whether it be your the lab, the hospital, whatever, it could come with a really high price, higher than your deductible, higher than your out-of-pocket expenses, and much, much more. Trying to get people to understand. Now, again, I can't address the emergencies that come up. I can't explain. However, nowadays, just because you break your arm or something doesn't mean you need to go to the emergency room and waltz right into the OR all the time. So that comes with some cost savings. But other than that, I'm not talking about the heart attack. I'm not talking about somebody that has a stroke. I'm not talking about a car accident in those regards. Now, I can look at those bills and make sure you're not paying any more than you need to. But those are not the instances that we're talking about here. We're talking about being chained to this card, being chained to how this card operates, how it works, and how it affects our expenses. And yeah, if you freeze frame this, you'll see that it is actually my Carnival card from my cruise. But I'm just driving the point. Emergency insurance card. And more, our insurances are driving our healthcare bus, not our provider, not our, well, hospitals are too, and that's another side note through the pandemic that we've all experienced and witnessed. And they're getting a lot of money doing it. So anyway, I'm not staying on point here. This article reminds us that healthcare has evolved. Back when I started as a nurse, it was more of a boutique service in the way that, yes, there was health insurance, because health insurance came way back in the 50s. But we also were admitted to the hospital for a week for like our annual physical. So we've come a long way in drilling down that kind of waste, but we're in for new waste and new expenses and all kinds of different issues that come with this. One of the big things that I try to engage in is that while it has evolved into something bigger than us, the government has taken on more and more control. That's why when Obamacare came in, I'm not addressing Obamacare, but by the time Obamacare came, we were forced into having insurance. And the costs rise, and how many insurance companies bailed out of the exchange? And we were paying a crazy amount for our health care. Health insurance from an employer was a benefit, and it still is. But that benefit is getting smaller and smaller, but yet the consumer, we're used to it. Well, that's our benefit, that's owed to us, we have insurance, and it's going to pay. Well, more and more insurances aren't paying for things, and we're doing things kind of crazy haphazardly. Insurance companies are dictating whether or not we're vaccinated. Insurance companies are now going to dictate the cost of our health care if we don't get vaccinated, and on and on and on. And that's just as of today and the pandemic debacle. So it's going to continue to run our world. It does things like if you're 45 years old, and I didn't look it up before I did this, but let's say your insurance company won't pay for an EKG for pre-op surgery until you're 50, but you have a history, and the anesthesiologist kind of would like to have that EKG as a pre-op. He doesn't order it on everybody, but in talking with you, the patient, he's like, I would feel better if I had an EKG. Everyone's going to get penalized because the insurance isn't going to pay for that EKG. But yet, the anesthesiologist has to take on the responsibility of putting you to sleep. Things like that over the years have driven me absolutely nuts on where we are with our health insurance and the dictates of our health care. Now, I'm not talking about fraud. I'm not talking about excessively ordering things. I'm not talking about keeping everything under wraps, because to be fair, I think a lot of fraud might go away if insurance could go away, except for what's the word I want? Catastrophic plans. I think if we paid more out-of-pocket expenses for our health and used catastrophic for the emergency stuff, I think that would be one wonderful step towards whatever. Share plans have some advantages. I still see some flaws with that. There's a couple of them out there that use insurance networks to give you options of your providers for this share plan. Not saying good or bad, but the problem with that is, again, if that doctor only goes to one of the most expensive hospital facilities on the planet that balance bills patients, no one's really winning there. And it happens all the time. Patients follow the rules. They get this. They get the list. Oh, you have to be a network. You have to find a network provider. My provider that I've been going to for 10 years now doesn't accept the plan, so I have to change over to another provider. But that provider, you don't know until it happens that provider goes to the wrong facilities and can cost you upwards and above what your insurance, what you would need, that's just normally need to pay out of pocket. What's the value in that? The other thing I point out in the whole mess is that there are things we can do. We, again, not talking about emergent things, but basic things like annual colonoscopies, or you got something going on that they might want to do an MRI on that's going to prove out to be okay, and nothing more much happens in your life that year. Do you want to pay $4,000 out of pocket for that MRI? And that's I'm exaggerating. It's probably less than that. But when it's all said and done, or would you have rather paid $450 and been done with it? That's a big exaggeration, because I a CT scan, I could argue that, but again, take one specialized X-ray and maybe a little lab work, and you're out, less than $1,000 versus over $4,000. Things like that you have to weigh your odds. We cut coupons. We have apps to have a 2-for-1 out to dinner. We have apps where you get rewarded for 10 cups of coffee or whatever, and the 11th one's free. Why don't we spend the same amount of energy on maximizing our healthcare dollars that tend to be a whole lot more than a cup of coffee? I think that's my point to everyone, is to consider your options, plan ahead, be educated. One of the things that we do is we look at people's health insurance and make sure that, like your primary care and all that stuff is in check, that the options for facilities are good, giving you the opportunity to make changes if you need to, give you pointers on how to save money, make sure that the bills that you're getting are all accurate. This all saves you money at the end of the day, and that's my goal here, is to educate people on knowing your options. I'm not telling you to go out behind a barn somewhere or in a back alley to get health care. There's great providers. I mean, so many times it's a matter of that network provider that you chose to follow your knee that you may or may not need surgery on, only to find out that that provider in this group that you're going to goes to the most expensive and only that one, whereas his partner goes to a surgery center and does those cases, or goes to another facility that works better with lesser rates than going to the high dollar doc or facility that's going to balance bill you at the end of the day after the insurance is paid. We can sit around and wait for things to happen in a government. I'm telling you, it's not going to happen, because this is why we're where we're at. Because out of all of the senators and congressmen that I've spoken to or had the opportunity to share thoughts with, they're all like, oh yeah, that sounds really good. Because my thing is, it needs to be totally erased. CMS needs to not be blown up literally, but it all needs to be started over and a new foundation built in order for us to make everything run, and address the situations that need to be addressed, take care of the groups that need to be taken care of, and open the door for a better marketplace for healthcare to fix itself instead of implode, which is what it's doing. So many people so much of the industry is monetarily gaining, while the consumer continues to lose on a daily basis. And we've done it to ourselves, because so many of us are programmed to go, here's my card. We do it to ourselves. We do it to ourselves every day. So I just encourage you to reach out to us and get more information and become more informed of your care and moving forward. Now, many of us are locked into the frontline docs, the docs that don't live by the guise of our health care facilities that are playing by the government rules and being forced to do things or not do things that to care for patients, which that's a whole nother side that I won't get into, but you know what I'm saying. And that's another thing. The free market group are there for you. They're there to take care of you. They're there to educate you and be your provider. Now, and I've always said this, the direct primary care group, there's the pieces missing are the certain things that, people may or may not need, like, if they need IV therapy, but there's all these different entities coming up in the world and are better opportunities than going to your big box store healthcare facilities. And I can't stress that anymore. And if you're going to a provider that's employed by one of the big box, you might want to think long and hard and consider your options. Reach out to us and find out what you can do to improve the status of your health care and your expenses. On that note, have a great day.